Welcome to Leonardo Versieux.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Can you guys hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here in San Diego. Good morning for all the members, the new members. And I will take you today for a ride in Brazil in the mountains of Espinhaço Range. And I hope you like to see many of our unique bromeliads in their environment. I will load my presentation. And if we have any problem during my talk, you can interrupt me and say that. Okay, can you guys see my full screen?
Yeah. Yes. Wonderful.
Is it working?
Yes. Yes.
Yes? Okay. So my talk will be the Espinaço Mountain Range in Minas Gerais and Bahia, and I called it a living laboratory for Bromeliad diversity. And during the talk, you guys will follow up, will understand why I'm calling it a laboratory. Well, I would like to start with a little bit of historical context. And if we look at this painting from a Brazilian painter, it depicts the arrival of the Portuguese, the European colonizers that colonized Brazil in April 22nd in 1500. And during their first moment here in this territory, their activities were more exploring the coast of Brazil. Initially, they explored this tree, the Brazilian wood, which gives a kind of red dye, which is very expensive at that time. And after that, the economy shifted to the sugarcane production close to the coast. But after a while, as there was competing production coming of sugar coming from Netherlands, from the Dutch colonies in the Caribbean, there was a big crash for this product, and Portugal suffered a lot. Then they start to explore the inland, the interior of Brazil, moving to the west. A similar procedure, I guess, to what happened in the United States, arriving east and moving inland. So in this illustration here, I think you can see my pointer, my mouse, you will see that the colonizers, Portuguese and first Brazilians, they were accessing these inland areas by the rivers using canoes and taking their luggage on donkeys, using weapons and living inside tents and exploring slave work, not only from African American, but also from the native Indians that lived in this interior. And finally, after this process, these colonizers achieved their goal, which was to find gold and diamonds, which took place mainly in the Espinaço Mountain Range in Minas Gerais and Bahia states. So the Espinaço has, besides biological and biodiversity and for the bromeliads importance, it also is linked to the history of Brazil, to the history of important economic cycles, and a cultural link as well, as I'm showing here in some of these small towns, charming towns that were established during this period of exploitation of golden mines. Here is Ouro Preto in the south of the Espinhaço Range in Minas Gerais. This is from the city where I was born, in Sabará, Minas Gerais as well. And we have this baroque architecture with the buildings, churches, and houses looking simple from the outside, but they are extremely rich in details and sculptures, ornamentations from the inside here. And then moving a little bit north, this is from Diamantina, another important city for the exploitation of diamonds. And this last picture is from Bahia, the other state where the Espinhaço reached its northern limit. So it was very important for the economy of that period. And here I also have a map of South America, a physical map. And as you can compare, looking at the Andes right here to the Brazilian shield, Brazilian territory, it's a very old, it has a very old geology. So we don't have contact of plates as you have in California. So our mountains, they are usually low, eroded, very old. But still, you can see, let me point, from this point to here would be the Espinhaço Mountain Range. And mountains are usually very important for plants, for plant biodiversity, for species evolution, and usually each mountain has its own flora. So just to be a little bit picky, let me show you Minas Gerais in red here. It would translate as general mines, referring to the mining history of this state. And here is Bahia, what would translate as bay. And from the early explorers that visited Brazil while we were still a colony of Portugal, or when the naturalists from Europe start having access to Brazilian territory, all of them wanted to see these mountains because they knew it had a very rich and particular flora. And this is one illustration from the Flora Brasiliensis, which is a very important book I'm showing here. And we see different physiognomies, different appearances. We have forests, we have a lot of outcropping, we have shrubs and valleys and sparse separated peaks. But if we zoom in, we will find our first bromeliad, the first bromeliad of my talk. Here we can see some rosettes of probably Achimea bromelifolia, which is a very common species in the Espinhaço range. Another illustration from the Flora Brasiliensis, which will show preoccupation and concern that von Martius had at that time, showing the water wheels here and the extraction of the soil. So the soil is ground. You grind the soil to extract the gold. And this results in the erosion and the removal of the soil. And so the plants suffer a lot. I will show this as a problem for conservation later. And moving to the 20th century, just to illustrate here with a famous couple of the bromeliad world, Mulford Foster and Racine Foster, when they visited Brazil in the 1940s, they wanted to visit the Espinhaço. So they walked around here, Belo Horizonte, Minas Gerais, in the southern limit of the Espinhaço, and they also visited the northern limit close here to Jacobina. It's a good field trip diary. If you have this book, you can check how they describe, sometimes poetically, these landscapes. So I will talk a little bit more about the Espinhaço, and then I will show the bromeliads we can find there. So in this map here on the left-hand side, I'm showing in black only the areas above 1,000 meters of elevation, would be something around 3,280 feet. Espinhaço is this name would translate as backbone or spine mountain range. It was given by a German geologist who lived here in Diamantina region. From south to north, it has about 1,000 kilometers long, and you see that there are some mountain range, some sections of this longer Espinhaço range. From this map, we can see that the Bahia would be this portion here. It's a floristic province. There are several plant families, not only bromeliads, that will occur in the Bahia section, while in Minas Gerais, here in yellow, we could subdivide it in three districts: Grão-Mogol, the Diamantina Plateau, and here in the south, it's a different area with more iron ore. I will show. So is the iron quadrangle. So in terms of geology, this mountain is very old, has areas which once were sea, desert, lakes, producing different types of rocks, and mainly quartzite, limestone, sandstone, and iron ore, which can appear as a carapace. We call this kanga, and each of these rocks will provide a different substrate for bromeliads. And also different metals deposits, as I said, iron, but also manganese, bauxite, gold, azite, plus several other precious stones and gems. So this results in different landscapes from areas with higher peaks and with steep slopes, like the Pico do Sol, the highest elevation, 2,000 meters we reach. Other places have mountains looking more like a table mountain with vertical walls and deep valleys, caves, canyons, and swamps. And when we have this combination in the geography and geology, different kind of substrate, plus different soil types, plus different humidity, different winds, and isolation among this distant mountain peaks, this all allows or contribute to richness in terms of plants. And this will be like the power that is moving the laboratory that I mentioned in the title of my talk. And in terms of, if you think globally, the Espinhaço is cited as one of the richest regions for plants in general. So let's take a closer look in Bahia. Here in the left, we see the vegetation. I will simplify. In green, forest. In yellow, it's a dry forest, dry woodland called Caatinga. And in orange, we have savanna or cerrado. Now, if we look to the right, we see the topographic, and we see the Espinhaço here with Chapada Diamantina here in the middle, and other arms of this mountain range. But comparing both maps, we see that in Bahia, the Espinhaço is immersed inside the dry woodland. So the neighborhood, let's say like that, is drier. Then from the north to the south, I will show some pictures. This is Jacobina, the northern limit of the Espinhaço in Bahia. Even if it's a drier areas, this sinuous mountains here around the city will capture some clouds. I guess in California you have very similar conditions like this, and this will provide a milder climate, and we will find some bromeliads among the shrubby vegetation. Look at the soil, very whitish, with sand, with small parts of quartzite, but it has a rich bromeliad flora. Now going to the south, this is the Chapada Diamantina National Park, one of the main attractions for those who like trails in the northeastern Brazil. And then we see here that the mountains are a little bit different. They are more in the table mountain shape. And we start to see canyons, and the valleys have more taller vegetation, and other parts have open fields. Looking at making a zooming in one of these table mountains, we start to see these mats these little islands of bromeliads. Another picture from Chapada Diamantina National Park, and then we can compare the distinct habitats provided at the same area. So we have forests, we have streams and rivers with more humidity, we have vertical cliffs, we have open fields, we have rocks. So all these are will contribute to the diversity of bromeliads you will see. Now moving south, this is Pico das Almas in Rio de Contas. It's one of the highest peaks of the Espinhaço as well. There is a flora well studied in this book, a very thick book, Flora of Pico das Almas. Botanists from Kew Gardens, from University of São Paulo, they have worked in this area for a long time. Just showing the one open field full of grasses. But even having all these studies taking place there, when we climbed the Pico das Almas, we could rediscover the species of Vrisia. It's called Vrisia maculosa. It's here, we see it growing on this vertical cliff, but it just show up when we reach the peak. And this will be a difficulty affecting most of the groups of plants in the Espinhaço. Sometimes they have a short blooming period and you are not in the field to document, to collect, to prepare specimens. Sometimes it's in populations are spread over over difficult to access places. So still there is a lack of knowledge, even with books and floras and studies like the one I just showed. So again, more pictures of Vrisia maculosa. This was like the first time it appeared in photos and after being described in the beginning of the 20th century. Now, if we move to Minas Gerais, it's a little bit different than Bahia, because in Minas Gerais, the Caatinga, the dry woodland, is restricted to this portion here in the north. The Espinhaço would be around here, dividing forests, Atlantic forest to the east, and savanna to the west. And this will affect the bromeliads composition in the Espinaço Mountain Range. Genera more related to mesic, humid areas like Nidularium, Quesnelia, Portia, from the bromeliads, they will reach the eastern face. They will not cross the Espinhaço and reach the western face, which is drier. So the Espinhaço will act like a barrier. So this would be in the eastern face. This is a very famous area for historical collections. The Serra da Piedade is close. It's close to Belo Horizonte, and we see a forest. And if we go to the west, if we move in this direction, then we will see the transition to savanna, to cerrado. And whenever you have two distinct biomes, two distinct vegetation types overlapping, you would expect a rich flora because you have elements from both. This is close to the Serra do Caraça, another very important mountain range, surrounded by mining. So it's like the last refuge for this kind of mountains. And we see a gradation from the valley. You see taller forest, and when you start to move up, the soil becomes more and more shallow, and the forest is substituted by a field full of lithophytes or ruticulous plants. And in this area, in the southernmost Espinhaço, we also see rocks. We call them itabirites. They are made by iron ore, and these are the first to be extracted when you are opening iron ore mining. But the main and most famous vegetation of the Espinhaço range is the rocky field or grassland with rocky soils, riparian fields. There are several names to this kind of vegetation. Is the vegetation that develops at altitudes above 900 meters along the entire Espinhaço Range. We see that the soil here is shallow, nutrient poor, stony, and several plant families will have seromorphic adaptations to thrive, to survive in such habitats. The rocks usually have this orientation to the west, reflecting all the movement during the rise of this mountain range. But also in the rocky fields, we have areas covered by sand, and sometimes during the rainy season, this accumulates water and becomes somehow like a bog or a wetter place. And these are some of the families we will see. Bromeliaceae, a lot of grasses, sedges, and I will show more later. Now moving to the Diamantina Plateau, just a picture of the Parque Estadual do Rio Preto. I will show a lot of pictures of bromeliads from this area. It's a state park, and showing also the gradation, the gradual change between the margins of rivers and water streams up to the mountains. Now it's more like savannas, not forest, as I showed earlier. But still, even in the middle of the Chapada Diamantina in other areas, whenever you have this gallery forest, then you will start to find the epiphytes, orchids, bromeliads, because it's a different microclimatic condition. So I like to explore when I am in the field. I like a lot to go to the gallery forest, search for bromeliads. And along the entire Espinhaço, we will see thousands of waterfalls, which provide constant sprays of water. So this high humidity will allows some Rupiculus bromeliads to grow on these vertical cliffs close to waterfalls. This is in Chapada Diamantina, Cachoeira da Fumaça, which means smoke. And the water barely touches the ground. It becomes like a spray. It has 300, almost 400 meter fall. Just to show you a little bit of other plant families, I will reach the bromeliads, but before I want to show you the Bromeliaceae, which is a monocot, it's a herb. The Shiridaceae, this one here. Areocaulaceae, which when it's not flowering, it has a rosette resembling bromeliads. It's a convergent evolution, but when it's blooming, it's in English, it's called everlasting flower. And a lot of shrubs from the family Melastomataceae here. Many of these plants, in the case of the Areocaulaceae, for example, 80% of all the species occurring in Brazil are endemic to the Espinhaço Mountain Range. So I started studying the bromeliads in the perspective of the whole state of Minas Gerais. I went to Selby Gardens, I worked with Harry Luther, and then I did my master's in Brazil, preparing a list of all the bromeliads, and this is published in Selbiana. And what called my attention at that time is that several groups, I marked some of them in blue here, they have high number of species in Minas Gerais, but also a high percentage, a high number of endemic species. Let's see, for example, Dyckia in the Pitcairnioid, 42 species in the whole state, and 76% of them are endemic. So this data started to call my attention. And the overall endemism for Minas is high. 36% of all the species of bromeliads only occur there. So we moved on and started to look at the diversity and conservation and plotting on the map to observe where these species were. So we published another paper with my former master's degree advisor, also bromeliad specialist, Tanya Vent. And from that work, first we noticed that there was a different amount of collections along the entire state. So areas where we had Atlantic forest in the south and east portion of the state, and along the Espinhaço Range, reaching the Diamantina Plateau, the middle of the Minas Gerais Espinhaço Range, concentrated most of the collections in the area and other museums. And when we counted for municipalities, we started to observe a pattern. So of these 10 municipalities listed here, only these two are out of the Espinhaço Range. So botanists, the explorers, researchers, they would collect more bromeliads in the Espinhaço Range because they knew that the Espinhaço Range had more species. So we have this bias or this trend of concentrations of collections. And when we look at the number of species, the southern Espinhaço Range, painted in red here in this square, also reflected the amount of collections, but also the diversity coming from that ecotonal, that contact of forest, savanna, and gradients of altitudes and different substrates. So these two breed cells here, they would overlap a lot with the Espinhaço Range. And we see areas with no record and no species, areas where the low number of species is an artifact of the low number of collections. But we started to think about the endemism. Where are these endemic species that we found in this number? About 40% of the overall bromeliads of Minas are endemic. Where are they distributed within the state? And we found that 62% of the endemic species of Minas Gerais were restricted to the Espinhaço Mountain Range. So our next step was to include the state of Bahia, because now we were concerned with Bahia state. And then we published this paper in a special issue of this journal called Megadiversity in English, or Megadiversidade in Portuguese. You can download or just Google it and it will appear. It's open access and has a lot of texts about the Espinhaço Range. So I published this together with Tanya, my colleague and bromeliad specialist Rafael Lousada, and my PhD advisor Graça Vanderlei. And what we found here, I highlighted only the abstract here in yellow, is that in this checklist, now considering Bahia and Minas Gerais, we found 26 genera, 224 species. It was based on fieldwork, herbaria, and literature. And in 19 genera and 106 species were found for Bahia, and a little bit greater number was found for Minas Gerais, 23 genera and 141 species. Here in this map, it's easier to see, 19, 106, 23, and 141. And of the total number of species occurring in the Espinhaço, nearly half of them, 111, are endemic to this range. And this is very curious. Only 21, less than 10%, occur in both sectors, in Minas and Bahia. So these results of high endemism, they highlight that multiple forces, ecological, evolutionary, historical, may be responsible for having such groups of bromeliads restricted to each section of the Espinhaço Range. And this isolation is, in fact, like moving. It's an evolutionary force that made me call the Espinhaço as a living laboratory to see some of the groups I'm going to depict now. So just to talk about subfamilies, Bromelioid was had the highest number of species here, Chilancioid and then Pitcairnioid. In terms of genus number, general number, Bromeliad also had the higher number. This is all from this paper from 2008. And now I will illustrate some of these plants, and the numbers I will present are from this paper, and only in a few cases I updated them. And I will start with this plant, which is very different. I don't know if you have it in cultivation in California. It's the genus Cotendophia. Cotendophia now has a single species, so it's what we call a monotypic genus. It only appears at areas above 1,000 meters of elevation in Chapada Diamantina in Bahia. If we look at Flora Neotropica at Smith, Lyman Smith and Downs monograph, it will be placed within the Pitcairnioid. But due to the recent changes in the subfamilies, now it's positioned within the Navioid subfamily. It looks like a dense tuft of grasses leaves. The underneath, the abaxial face of the leaf has a lot of trichomes. And here we have the inflorescence with several branches. The flowers are white, the ovary is green. It's not very showy in terms of bracts and flower colors, but it calls your attention in the field due to the ramification, this branching pattern of the inflorescence. Flowers are usually visited by bees and wasps. We only find this plant in Chapada Diamantina. Moving on to the Pitcairnioid, one of the most abundant and richest genus is Dyckia. Here is Dyckia glandulosa, a microendemic species only occur at Parque Estadual do Rio Preto, in Pico do Itambé, in the Diamantina Plateau in Minas Gerais. 27 species out of 38, including Bahia and Minas Gerais Espinhaço, are endemic, so it's a very high level of endemism, 71%. They are terrestrial, rupiculous, or grow among spaces among the rocks filled with very shallow soil. And the difficulty with the taxonomy of Dyckia, if you grow Dyckia, you probably has had problems to identify your plants, is because we have several complexes of species, several morphospecies, extensive synonyms. So if you are describing a new species, you have to study a lot of plants, a lot of names that are already placed as synonyms of other species. And particularly for the southern portion, the iron area, where we have more than 20, a lot of Dyckia species, many of the areas are already lost for mining. So we cannot even go to the field trying to recollect, to add more information to old descriptions. So the species are very poorly defined. As we see, here is a good illustration from Dyckia hariflora, which is endemic. But if we have to go to the field or to compare this illustration with plants with known and precise provenance, it's very hard to find. And it's not uncommon to go to the field, collect, and then you cannot identify, as I did here for this beautiful specimen. Another genus very important in the Espinhaço is Encolirium. And here I brought the photo from Serra do Cipó, Encolirium subsecundum, and it's endemic to Minas Gerais Espinhaço. Encolirium comes from the Greek. Enkos means thorn, lyrium means lily. It has, considering Bahia and Minas, 15 species, and 12 of them are endemic to the Espinhaço. They do not grow outside the Espinhaço. Terrestrial, rupiculous, or saxciculous. This one is rupiculous. This one I would call saxciculous, is Encolirium pedicellatum, very whitish with a thick indumenta, because it has already some soil around. It's a smaller plant, but with very long pedicellate flowers. It's from the Diamantina Plateau. And this is another common species, in the Diamantina Plateau. This has a red color morph, but you also will see it completely green. Is Encolirium magaliaceae, growing together with Bromeliaceae. And you see here, between two rocks, they start to colonize to form like an island, retaining the organic matter. I don't know if you can see well, there is a hummingbird here. And this is the inflorescence of Encolirium magaliaceae from Parque do Rio Preto, and the other one from Diamantina Plateau. Pitcairnea is not very well represented in the Espinhaço range. None of them are endemic. This is Pitcairnea curvidens, is a species described from the area of Serra do Cipó, but also occurring in other mountain ranges not belonging to the Espinhaço. But this one here is Pitcairnea brade, very restricted regarding habitat. It only grows on the margins of water streams and has yellow flowers. This one is not blooming, it has fruit. Moving to the Tillandsioid, I would highlight the genus Versieux, with 37 species in Bahia and Minas Gerais Espinhaço, and 20 are endemic. This one is Versieux medusa from the Pico do Itambé. I described this species and I gave this name to it because it resembled the medusa, the Greek mythological hair with the snakes. And here is Versieux minor, also from the Diamantina Plateau, with simple inflorescence and disticles flowers. Still from the same park, we see the fog, the mist, the Melostomataceae shrubs, and this is Versieux densiflora. Until recently, the only place where you could see this Versieux was inside this park. We found it in like 100 kilometers in another reserve, but it's still endemic to the Diamantina Plateau, the middle of the Espinhaço in Minas Gerais. This is Versieux minarum, a species described by Lyman Smith, and that only grows over the iron rock. You can see the rock here is red. And I took this picture, it is in Sabará, my hometown, an area they were prospecting iron ore, and they go with the caterpillars and they just passed over. So a student of mine, Pamela Lavor, did a lot of genetic research. She studied the pollination. There is a paper in Journal of Bromeliad Society published in 2017. I also called the attention for the problem involving mining and the Rupiculus bromeliads, because the mining companies, they say, okay, I'm going to compensate the area that was cleared, protecting the same area in the forest, in the valley, but it's not the same ecosystem. You have to protect the area for the bromeliads. So after a lot of pressure, now we have a new national park close to Belo Horizonte protecting this kind of environment, and people are more concerned about that. So that, like, we have ex situ collections. This is Versieux minarum under cultivation with many other plants from the Kanga. Here we see Achinea bromelifolia in the Belo Horizonte Botanic Garden. So it's a place where you can also have a glance on this flora. Just to show how the mining takes place. So this is, they start cutting the top of these mountains, and then they wash this earth to extract the iron ore and gold. Another picture. And in the other side here is the Caraça, where we have Pico do Sol, the highest point of the Espinhaço, with more than 2,000 meters of elevation. Just still with Versieux, I want to highlight Serra do Cipó National Park, Versieux stricta, endemic to there. Versieux atropurpurea, look how long are the stamens here. When you are walking in the field, it's difficult to notice the rosettes. You will perceive the plant only if it's blooming. So is that problem that I mentioned about documenting. You have to be in the field all the time, paying attention, because sometimes the blooming period is short, and if you miss that specimen, it will not be represented in the herbarium. And this one on the top, I don't think this plant is in cultivation, distributed worldwide, but is a species that I described with my advisor, Graça Vanderlei, and we saw somehow the image of a fisherman. The inflorescence had like the shape of a fishing method. The fishing, and then we call this Vrisia piscatrix, which means fishing. Then if we move to Bahia, if you visit Chapada Diamantina, you will see a lot of this. It's Vrisia chapadensis, very common here, being visited by stingless bees. They perch, they open orifices to steal nectar and pollen, and they are usually easy to spot because they have these yellowish leaves, and they also tend to form those little islands. Here with cacti, a lot of Micrantocereus. It appears to be like a garden, right? You have rocks, bromeliads, cacti, here orchids, and so it's very well a good composition, and all these plants are very ornamental. Vrisia exaltata, another endemic to Chapada Diamantina. And this Vrisia is now moving to a new genus called Stigmatodon. And we have done a lot of research with this species in particular, because this is kind of a label of the Espinhaço range, is Vrisia oligantha, and it will be moving to Stigmatodon. Vrisia was split in several genera in the Bromeliaceae. Recently have suffered rearrangements, and the ones, in the case of this, the ones with a particular kind of stigma, which has small teeth, will be the genus are already, but this one was not transferred yet to Stigmatodon. And only one specimen was found recently outside the Espinhaço. So we documented this plant throughout the entire Espinhaço, north to south. Here you see in my mouse here, all open fruits, capsules, but it pops from the peduncle. And usually it grows as epiphyte on the Velosiaceae, on Velosia, but also on the rocks. And there are at least 4 species. We call this a complex. It's somehow difficult to separate if they are not blooming. So we have Vrisia oligantha, Vrisia pseudo-oligantha, it means the false oligantha, Vrisia lancifolia, and another one we are studying right now. And when I show this picture and ask, how many bromeliads do you see? You see that it's hard to perceive the bromeliads of this group. They are grayish, they have grayish leaves. And this is also a Stigmatodon, is Vrisia lancifolia, and you can separate from the background here from the rock and the lichens. This is Vrisia lancifolia, only occurs on the northern limit. And my student, Kleber Rezende, did a great job. I co-advised him. His advisor was Aline Oriani, and he studied all the anatomy, the morphology of the leaves, and made comparisons, and he could find 4 groups which correspond to the 4 species of this complex. It's a paper published in 2020 in Systematic Botany. And another very interesting paper with the same plant group, this complex, Vrisia oligantha, confirmed the pattern that I showed in the beginning about the split of Espinhaço Bahia, Espinhaço Minas Gerais, and the Espinhaço Minas Gerais divided in the southern and the Diamantina Plateau and the region of Grão-Mogol. So one species, the genetics of one species is somehow reflecting the structure that we find for an assemblage of different plant families and different species. So this paper is very interesting and you can reach, it's available in Journal of Biogeography. It was published less than a year ago by Marcos Dantas Queiroz, advised by Clarice Palma Silva, and co-advised by me. And another interesting finding is about the ages of these lineages. This Vrisia from the Espinhaço, I said in the beginning that the mountain is old, but the species itself is not so old. It has less than 1,000,000 years. Now moving to Tillandsia. Tillandsia, we will see a lot of them within the gallery forest, growing on the trees. None of them endemic because they disperse well. One Tillandsia stricta growing over a cacti, Tillandsia streptocarpa, Tillandsia gardneri. These are all very common species in the Espinhaço range. And in this picture, I show the large number of Tillandsia streptocarpa. There was a problem with identification in my checklist. We would call it Tillandsia ariza, but now it's considered to be only Tillandsia streptocarpa. And you see it forming a very dense population over the rocks. Sometimes it doesn't even have a single root, and they use the older leaves like to sustain their vegetative body. I'm not going to talk in detail about Alcantaria. You have my talk on YouTube, my last talk for you guys. And just to show Alcantaria turgida in the middle of a rocky field in the Espinhaço, in Serra do Cipó. The genus has more species now being discovered and described from rocky fields areas, totaling 4 endemic species. The 4 species are endemic. And one interesting thing is that Valtilia used to be Alcantaria, and this was a new genus proposed by Lenny and in 2017. Very difficult to find in the field because it only grows close to water streams, so it's very restricted regarding the habitat conditions. I placed here a picture of Gerd Hackbach. He's a botanist who is the largest plant collector in Brazil. He passed away a few years ago. The species was named by Lyman Smith in honor of Gerd Hackbach. And during my PhD, I did try to find a lot of this plant in the field, but only when I finished my thesis, this species appeared in a place a little bit different than the place we were searching for it. And the good thing is that last year I'm far away from the Espinhaço, and I was here in Natal in my university, saying, oh, okay, I miss the Espinhaço, the rocky fields. I wish so much I could describe a species, a very different one. And then my student, one PhD student that had just finished her project, she sent me an email saying that she had a green flowered plant. And then I said, oh, that's like a green petals is not something common, right? And then we start to study, and this was the second Valtilia species. It was published last year. Still known only from one population in the Pico do Itambé area. And I was happy that few weeks ago, the people that take care of this park, of this reserve, they called me, and they are preparing a management plan to conserve their bromeliads, because they have a lot of bromeliads within this Pico do Itambé park. So this was an addition. Moving to the bromelioids, I'm moving to the end. Eckmer with 10 species, 2 are endemic. Bromelifolia is a common species. The variety with white bracts is also common in the Espinhaço. We see here the flowers green. Another picture, Bromelifolia as well, growing on the rocks together with cacti. Achimea phaneroflavia, also very common in the Diamantina Plateau. Other species are common there are Achimea nudicalis, for example. Quite easy to be found. Moving to Bilbergia. This is a beautiful specimen of Bilbergia vittata in Parque Estadual do Rio Preto. Photo from my friend Pedro Viana. 12 species considering Bahia and Minas. Bilbergia elegans, the elegant Bilbergia. This species is common in the southern portion of the Espinhaço, but it's not endemic, nearly endemic to the Iron Quadrangle, but a few other places around have. And this is in cultivation in the United States. Another common species is Bilbergia amoena, and it will be easily found within these forest patches. We call them capões. These capões are these islands of forest, usually associated with water fonts, water places where the water come out from the earth. Moving to Orthophytum. Orthophytum had substantial change as well recently. A large number of species that used to belong to Orthophytum were moved to Syncoria. And Orthophytum means from the Greek straight plant, ortho, straight, phytum plant, and this is related to the shape of the pedunculate plants. So I brought here Orthophytum diamantinense, endemic to the Espinhaço, and Orthophytum melobarretoi, endemic to the Serra do Cipó. Most of them are terrestrial or rupiculous, but in more flat rocks like this one, this area here. And a lot of species of Orthophytum migrated to Syncoria. Here I'm indicating the website of Field Museum in Chicago, where you can download a field guide. This field guide is still treating them as Orthophytum, but it's easy to make the conversion so you can identify your species. Syncoria now has 11 species. Endemic to the Espinhaço, is only in the Espinhaço. Most of them, 10 out of 11, are from Bahia. And only Syncoria humili, very delicate plant with this pink half portion of the leaves, and is endemic to Minas Gerais, to the Grão-Mogol, close to the border with Bahia. This is Syncoria hatchback. See the habitat. They grow forming like a mat, sometimes in the shade of rocks, close to waterfalls. They like a lot of the waterfalls. This is Syncoria ophiuroides, described by Rafael Lousada and Graça Vanderlei. It was described in Orthophytum and then moved to Syncoria. Syncoria is an old genus, but it was placed as synonym of Orthophytum, and now it was resurrected. This is very famous. Syncoria albopicta used to be Orthophytum albopictum. It has this dense indumentum around the inflorescence. So this is the meaning of the epithet. Albo means white. And then we move to Lapanthus. Lapanthus has only 2 species. Both of them are endemic to Minas Gerais, Espinhaço. They do not reach Bahia. Honors Maria das Graças Lapa, it's her surname, Vanderlei, my former advisor in PhD, has formed a lot of the Brazilian bromeliad specialists. And Rafael Lousada and myself, we were both PhD students of her, and we dedicated this genus to her. And it encompasses the orange flowered Lapanthus duarte and the white flowered Lapanthus itambense, which can have reddish or green primary bracts. And this genus, when we published, we were a little bit, how can I say, brave maybe, or we had the courage to submit. We were students, and without any phylogenetic studies. And nowadays it's very difficult to say, oh, this is a new genus. You must prove it using molecular data, showing those trees with the branches, indicating that you are dealing with a monophyletic group. And at that time, we used morphology, cytogenetic, petal appendage type and shape, and leaf anatomy and floral morphology. So it was, we were very happy to see that we published this at Systematic Botany. And here you see in the habitat, it has thin leaves, very thin, reddish when it's blooming, but sometimes it blooms without becoming red, particularly if it's not in cultivation. Another change that took place recently, based on Elton's Lemming work on the Cryptanthus, is the separation of this new genus Forsea, with 7 species, all of them endemic as well to the Diamantina Plateau in Minas Gerais. It's named after Rafaela Fosa, is a famous Brazilian botanist. She's also a bromeliad specialist, and she's in charge of the Brazilian Flora Online. We just finished our Flora Online. You can access its website. You can consult all the species, and we have keys, photos. It's Flora do Brasil. Just search on Google Flora of Brazil online, and this was a multi-hands work. Almost 1,000 botanists worked together, and this was done completely last year. So Forsea used to be part of Cryptanthus, right? And this new phylogenetic work sustained the separation of Forsea. Here is Forsea Leopoldo Rosti, endemic to the Diamantina area, with this cream-colored petals, and it has more, if compared to Lapanthus, for example, it has stiff, a little bit more coriaceous leaves. This is a beauty, is a gem. Forsea micra, we described this from the Parque do Rio Preto. It has like 5 centimeters in diameter. It's this size, sometimes this size. A very delicate plant from Rio Preto State Park. And this is a very common plant under cultivation, used to be known as Cryptanthus varazi or Cryptanthus varazi. And if you have this plant and want to update your tags, now it is Forsea varazi. Okay, very whitish, full of this velvet indument, and has this curving leaves, also from Diamantina Plateau. Moving on in the bromeliads, this is another very unique group of plants, is the genus Eduandria celoana. These are terrestrial rhizomatous herbs that grow not on the rocks, they grow on earth. They like substrate, more clay, and on shade forest, but still close to water streams. Here we see it blooming with this lilac purple apex petals, and in fruit here. It's a genus monotypic as Contendophia. Only one species is known, and the area of occurrence was a little bit expanded by Elidio Guassoni and Claudio Coelho de Paula, both bromeliad specialists as well in Minas Gerais. And there is a very interesting paper about this, their finding, published in Journal of Bromeliad Society, volume 58. So this is exclusive as well to the Espinhaço. And to finish, now my efforts are on the genus. I'm studying and have students working on the genus Hohenbergia. And we are collecting mostly in Bahia, where we have 15 species, but no records of Hohenbergia in Minas Gerais so far, because the northern part of the Espinhaço, close to the border with Bahia, is poorer sample than the southern portion. So by our field work, I expect that you invite me again in the future to come here and talk only about Hohenbergia. I will keep this genus for the next talk, and I leave here some references. You can then check on the YouTube when the talk is being recorded. You just stop here and check some of the papers I mentioned, and some of them are also available on my blog, and here's my email. I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, for your time. I passed a little bit, 1 hour, and thank also the speakers committee at San Diego Bromeliad Society, Andrew, Dan, Eloise, Pamela, and Juliana. We did a rehearsal. You are very nice people and give me good feedbacks, and I thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much.
Hi, Leonardo, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Tudo bom?
Tudo bem.
So I was wondering, when you're studying these plants that live on the vertical cliffs like the Bromeliad maculosa that you showed, do you guys ever use drones?
Not yet, but it's in our plans to start using them. We are discussing this for a new project. We are joining to use drones to at least to see, because the problem with the drone is that still the drone does not have an arm with a clipper to collect, right?
Yeah.
This is our dream, to have a drone that could collect the plant. But to see if it's blooming and to take pictures, this would be something that we are, yes, considering.
We have a question on the Zoom. Yeah.
Oh.
Two in the chat.
Thank you for a great presentation. No.
Hi, this is Linda Sheets. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I do have a question from Leonardo. Hello, Leonardo, bon dia. What is the difference between Saxicollis and Rupestrian? They seem to involve rocks. How are they different?
Okay, good question. Thank you, Linda. Yes, usually they are treated as synonyms, but when people say Saxicollis means that there is some fragments of rocks forming a soil. It's in between rocks, Saxicollis. Over the rock, attached to the surface of the rock, Rupicollis. This is, but it's not something very, people you interchange them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Andrew.
Hi, Leonardo. Good talk. Enjoyed it. It appears that many of the plants that you show here should be of great interest for us. Some of the Bromeliads in particular, I think, and maybe several of the Cincareas, we should be able to grow them. But can you comment on the rainfall where these occur in the Espinhaço range? How it occurs, time of year, and how much?
Okay. Well, most of the Espinhaço range has like a seasonal climate. So we have a rainy season in Brazil, in southeastern and in part of Bahia during the summer. So from November up to February, we have a very rainy season. Espinhaço range in Minas Gerais is called It's like our water tank. It provides water to the one of the main river is São Francisco River. So we have a lot of water heads in the Espinhaço Range. So you get close to 2 meters, 2,000 millimeters of rain in that portion. In Bahia, is a little bit lower the amount of rain that you get, but still you have those clouds that comes from the east and they condense, and then you have orographic rains on the east side of the Espinhaço in Bahia. But when you cross to the west, then you don't see Vrisia anymore, for example. So within the gallery forest, that was your question, you have during the night fog as well coming from the water or coming from the waterfalls. So even in the drier portion of the Espinhaço in Bahia, which is surrounded by Caatinga, the altitude together with the lower temperature during the night ensures humidity level that allows epiphytism to occur. But it's around that, 1,500 to 2,000 millimeters of rain here. And the dry season is from May to September, October. So you have even fires. It's a problem in the Espinhaço, because like July, August, we have a lot of fires. So because it's dry, you don't get much rain.
Thank you.
Question.
So,
How much, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. How much has mining affected the overall ecology of the region? I mean, has it had a major effect or is it only minor?
I would say it's more, it affects more the iron quadrangle area, but now it's expanding because the iron quadrangle, as I showed the picture, they remove completely the surface. In the other portions of the Espinhaço, we still have mining, but it's more only now they are finding iron ore. They usually are jams, or it's more a punctual effect. But for the iron quadrangle, some plants were really in a very bad conservation case because they have narrow distribution. So I guess for Vrisia minarum nowadays, it's only protected within like 2 or 3 parks, because the mining took most of the area. I have one question here in the chat. Where and how do the non-endemic species settle in these areas? Well, they grow together. You will see, for example, in the same gallery forest, you see Tillandsia usneoides, which is a widespread species. And then you find one species that is endemic. But as I don't know if I emphasize that, but as the pressure of the environment is strong, we have a convergence and a dependence upon adaptations. So usually you need to be adapted to survive, to grow on a peak at 2,000 meters high that only get missed during the night or in the early morning. So this is what we call ecological filter. Only a few adapted can survive in that place. So when the environment is more harsh or has a particularity, like the waterfall all the time with water. Not all the bromeliads like water all the time, because this sunk their trichomes. You know that you cannot water the bromeliads all the time, dump them in the water for a full time. But some lineages are adapted to this, and then they will occupy these niches. So this is usually in the forest you will find more co-occurrence of widespread species. And in the rock outcrops, then you have more isolated species, also because the rock outcrops, they are isolated from one another by valleys. So if the seed cannot travel a long distance, it will, if by chance, once, imagine that my hand here is one rock outcrop, one peak, one range, and the other hand, another peak. If I have a population here of bromeliads, of Dyckia, blooming and fruiting and dispersing seeds, if the seed cannot cross the valley, it will remain in situ, in that same area. And this favors speciation. So for rupiculous plant and for Dyckia, for example, it's expected to have more endemic species. This was found also in the tepuis of Venezuela. I guess.
Thank you, Leonardo. I'm mainly interested in whether, the non-endemic species were brought by humans, birds, animals, ocean water. Just interested in that.
Okay. Yes, not by humans, no. But the non-endemic are those widespread, like the Lanceolus neoids. So they were naturally, or by birds, or the seed could travel by the wind, due to that this is a reproductive and dispersal ability of each group. An interesting thing is like Pitcairnia has no endemic, Bilbergia, only one. If the fruit is dispersed by bird, then it goes further distant. If the fruit is a capsule that opens and the seed just drops close to the mother plant, as Dyckia and many other Encolirium, then the water, the runoff of the water will disperse. So this affects the way the community of bromeliads is structured.
Thank you very much, Leonardo.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you, Leonardo, the Da Vinci of Bromelia.
Thank you very much. I will leave the meeting and I left my email on the presentation. If you have any doubts, please feel free to contact me, okay?
Thank you.